Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Will, and today we will be talking about the billionaire Oprah Winfrey on her success habits, principles, and peak performance. Just as a FYI, there have been over 50 billionaires with a B who have written books, many on how they achieve success and wealth and fulfillment and happiness and how you can do the same. And the funny thing is, no one reads these books. So that's really crucial for you. I highly recommend you read at least one of these. So what we're going to be covering in this podcast episode is straightforward. I will be talking about Oprah Winfrey, and I've discovered and uncovered a lot about her that I've learned and that I want to share with you. And where I've learned this is from her book, What I Know for Sure, as well as various interviews and documentaries and videos you can find online or on iTunes or in books about her. So I've compiled all this knowledge and I want to share this with you so that we can both learn from her together and achieve unbelievable, immeasurable wealth, happiness, and performance beyond our wildest dreams. Now, why I like Oprah so much is very simple. I really like her as a billionaire because of two big reasons. One, her background, and second is her the method that she made her money. So let's start with her background. She has two very clear and obvious ethnic hurdles to overcome culturally. So you already know this. Society kind of, discriminates a bit, more than a bit, against African American people and females. And so she overcame these two hurdles and rose to prominence to become the first African American billionaire, that's with a B, in the history of humankind, which I think is incredible. And on top of that, she's widely known, so successful. And the second thing, of course, is how she did it. Now, most other billionaires are very business focused. What I mean by that is they understand businesses. They made their money through a business. They're business people. They understand how it works. They're CEOs. And it can leave the rest of us discouraged a bit when we see these people, because what if our, God-given talent is not business? What if we don't want to be CEOs? What if we enjoy video games or art or something else? So I really think it's inspiring to see that she has done this by mainly using her, unique talent, which is interviewing and, being a TV personality. And so I really think that's incredible. It's awesome, in fact. And there's so much wealth and wisdom you can learn from her because she made a lot of mistakes that cost her a lot of heartache, time, and money. And maybe you can save that time. I was going to say shave, but save's a better word. You can save that time by just learning from her mistakes and not making the same. And some of those things, as you'll see, she really regretted, but what's done was done. And I just find her story really incredible for so many reasons. Her as a person, I think, she's just so incredible as a socially skilled individual. I am oftentimes very awkward and arguably below average in terms of charisma or social skills, and an introvert. So I always love learning and developing, and one day I want to, be closer to her level of skill. obviously, we're all our own people, and maybe I'm not supposed to be extroverted, but I do think there's something you can learn from her. I feel like she can go into any room and just grace anyone with her presence in a way where everyone feels comfortable, and she always knows what to say. Whereas the rest of us, there's just awkward silence. Nonetheless, I want to just get straight to what I learned from her. I mean, I could spend a long time just talking about why I really like her so much. So let's just get down to it. Here are the tactics, routines, habits, and principles and values and advice of Oprah Winfrey, the icon, the Renaissance woman, the girl who was born with the worst beginnings. Let's start there. The first lesson I want to impart on you is that humble beginnings do not mean humble endings. Even in this day and age, I see that a lot of questions like this online. People wonder if it's too late, or because of their screwed up childhood, they won't succeed. And all of us have struggles like this. Maybe we didn't get an education. Maybe we were born with horrible parents who didn't treat us right. There's a number of things that could come in our way. And for me, I had a case of the negative Nancy mind. And what this means is pretty much I had a negative attitude. I used to really just naturally, without noticing it, just complain and blame everything but myself for my circumstance. Why I wasn't rich, why I wasn't as fulfilled, or why my goals weren't achieved. And slowly I've been rooting that out of my thinking. And for me, I never really appreciated the fact that I was born in the United States of America until I started reading and learning from Warren Buffett and a bunch of other people, and started really understanding how lucky I was. I mean, there's hundreds of other countries out there. I mean, there's everything from Azerbaijan to Kenya to Nicaragua to, Japan, Korea. And I was born in the US of A, which is, one of the luckiest places to be born. And I took my education and, all those opportunities for granted. And I focused on the things that I didn't have. The fact that I didn't have that many friends, or that I wasn't as good at school or successful or wealthy or whatever else. And that's the first thing. Oprah, I don't think her mindset was very different. Her background growing up was bad. She was physically and sexually abused. She was pregnant. The person who impregnated her left her. And at the age of 19, her baby followed a miscarriage and was not born. And she struggled with a lot of self and body image problems. Now, that's obviously not a girl you would expect to grow up into such a confident, beautiful, successful person as she is. On top of that, her whole conception, she was only born because her mother decided to have a wild night with her father one night. They never met. They never saw each other again. It was one night under a tree. And that's something like you'd expect to find in fairy tales or something like that, but that stuff actually happens. And so she was born on accident because her mother was impregnated on accident. So I think it's really interesting. If you read her book, What I Know for Sure, you could definitely see that she still struggles a lot with her body image and, society's label of fat. She's done a lot of work and, of course, been at the head of a lot of diet campaigns over the years for her and her following. But you can kind of see how she still struggles with it a bit, maybe more than a bit, in her book. And I think it's a bit of a shame that society does that to you. But studying evolutionary biology and reading a lot of books on it, I've kind of learned that it's kind of genetic as well. Like, it's not because business or marketers did this. It's something that's genetic and inborn for us to discriminate based off how a woman's physique looks. So, interesting topic for another day. I'm sorry to ramble, but incredible woman. She's done a lot and overcome a lot. And you can do the same. Number 2, savor the moment and appreciate every little thing. You really see this play out in her book. I mean, she is just incredibly detailed as in her description of what she appreciates in life. And of course, I highly recommend you do that practice of savoring at least once a week, because studies have shown that it really helps with your long-term levels of happiness. And I mean, she will go through and just describe in extreme detail the drinks she would drink, the tapestries or clothes that she was able to buy. And, some of it is stuff that we can't afford. But some of it is stuff that we all have. And she just goes into extreme detail. Like, some of the stuff, yes, it's just like ridiculously out of our reach. Like, I think one time she described this like really fancy type of coffee drink with like all these like ales and ointments and herbs that she put in there. But what I really liked about it was how she made sure to appreciate every little part of that. And it's really amazing because we take it for granted so much. Like, now when I go outside and I see leaves, rather than just saying I am savoring and in the moment and appreciating the leaves, I really want to look at every detail of that leaf and really appreciate the beauty and complexity of Mother Nature, and really like describe all the details of a leaf. And I think that will really help you with your happiness as well if you try that out. And then for those of you who are like jealous that Oprah is like rich, also remember that she was very happy and fulfilled and on fire because she did what she was passionate about, even when she wasn't rich. So remember that it's not about the money. She was on fire and just as happy and loving it, even when her show was just starting out as a talk show and no one really expected her show to go anywhere. So remember that. Now here's the 4th lesson I want to share with you. So Oprah Winfrey, she had a journey towards when she finally hit it big with her talk show. And you'll find that this is the case for many talk show hosts and successful people. Like Ellen DeGeneres is a big one. Now, with Oprah, what you'll find is that she did what she thought she would like and what she thought her calling was. And it happened to align really, really well with what her genetic talents were. Many of the TV show producers said that she was born to be on TV. She was not scared. She was never camera shy, and she was just herself, whether she was on or off air. And so what she did, and maybe you can learn something from this if you're still trying to find your passion or something that, not only you're passionate about but makes money, learn from Oprah's career journey. What you'll see is that she started in radio And she liked it because she got to read and she was a great reader and orator, but something was missing. So after several years working in radio, she moved to another like TV news reporter place and spent a few years there. And then she was told by her boss, don't leave or you'll never make it. You won't get this job back and you'll never go anywhere. You shouldn't leave. You're going to take a pay cut if you do. But she really believed that she couldn't progress and keep growing if she stayed in her city. She needed to go to Chicago, which she did a lot of research and thinking. She found that it was her, the best city for the greatest level of opportunity and career growth for her. So she took a risk and it paid off. She eventually convinced someone to let her start a talk show, and that went on after decades to slowly but gradually grow to a multi-billion-dollar TV network. Now, the point is a couple things. First, make sure that you don't subscribe to perfectionism. You're not, or I'm not going to say not, but you're probably not going to get a perfect job on your first try out of college. It's something that Warren Buffett says a lot in his video interviews. If you look on YouTube, it's not going to happen on your first attempt. So it's okay if you're like Oprah and maybe 70% of the job is really good, but then there's just something missing. For Oprah, it was the fact that she didn't even know exactly what it was yet, but she knew that there was something missing in terms of the lack of a visual cue. And eventually that led to television. And maybe at the time she didn't even know what a talk show host was or think that that was an option. But she slowly started feeling out what she liked and didn't like and moved. And then, of course, the second thing would be, especially when you're younger, take those risks. Oprah, and again, I think this is something that she genetically had because she just naturally was always like this. But I do think that if you're not genetically like this, I'm not genetically like this, I believe that we can adopt at least most of her behavior in a certain way. So what I mean here is that if you or I find ourselves in a situation like Oprah, where your boss is, telling you don't do this, it's going to ruin your life, but you're young and you know that if you stay here, the opportunities are just going to dwindle and there's tremendous room for growth and potential and career upswing, and it's what's calling to you, and it's the city that you've always dreamed of going to, then do it, even if it's going to be a pay cut. And that's what she did. And maybe your situation won't be as extreme as that, but maybe you can use the same concept if a event comes up. Of course, if you're younger, it's a lot easier because you don't have children to deal with, and you can always, when you're already towards the bottom, there's only one way to go, and that's up. Okay, the next thing that you can learn from Oprah. Do you want to know the secret of television? She actually has been asked this a lot, and she's actually revealed a lot of advice on why she succeeded so well on TV. And some of these things are just so insightful. You'll be amazed, shocked, excited to hear these. I'm not going to go into television probably, but I do do a lot of content for a large audience in the sense that I'm recording this podcast and a lot of people will listen to this. So in that sense, I do think that there's a lot I can learn from this, and maybe you can too, because, there's a lot of mediums, whether it's a business or an advertisement or social media, where you are communicating and growing a large audience into a larger one. So you could learn a lot from what Oprah has to say. Now you're probably just waiting on the edge of the seat to hear exactly what I'm going to tell you. You're just saying in your head right now, just tell me what it is. What did Oprah say? about the secret to television. Well, I'm not going to hold the suspense any longer. Or will I? Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, so here's what Oprah said about television. She says, the secret to television is to be yourself because people connect with people they relate with. It's very simple, and there's more to it, but I just want to touch on that first. Very simple and very important. I think I was reading a book by Russell Brunson. He's a successful entrepreneur, and he said in this book, he gives a lot of speeches, by the way, where he's paid to speak. And in his book, he says he started by giving these speeches where he would give a lot of stories about his struggles as a wrestler. He used to be a school state champion wrestler or whatever. And he basically, at the end of every speaking engagement, would get all these people come up and say, man, I used to wrestle too, and your story really spoke to me. I want to buy your product. And then when he started experimenting with stories of a different sort and revealing how he struggled with parenting and having a child, that's when all of a sudden the people that came to him after the speaking engagement changed to struggling parents who were struggling with getting pregnant. So what you'll find is that there's a lot of power in choosing a topic or situation that your audience can relate to. The next thing she said was, revealing vulnerabilities is a great way to be relatable. Oprah was genuinely herself on and off the show, as I mentioned, and she calls it one of her greatest talents. So for her, she also really discovered, honed in on what she was genetically gifted to do, because the one way that you can succeed in a competitive world, by definition, because there's competitors who can, usually work just as hard as you and do all the other stuff, is to find those genetic talents where you have a competitive advantage that they can't copy. So for her, it was her ability to be genuinely herself, which suited her medium of television really well. And also, she did something incredibly different from all the other talk show hosts at the time, which was she revealed all these vulnerabilities. In fact, on her very first show, her very first episode, she started the show by revealing that she had hives under her armpits because she was just that nervous. And that was unheard of at the time. And it really related for the audience, because the audience was like, you know what? I've never heard a talk show host reveal that. They're human just like me. I can relate to this person. They're not perfect. Let's go on this because there's more. Make it personal. So the technical aspects of the show was made so that the viewer felt like they were sitting right next to Oprah. So they made a concerted effort to make the show feel one-on-one. Versus all the other talk show hosts, they kind of had it where the microphones were, farther away, and it really felt like you're watching or listening to this from all the way in the stadium or crowd. And so what they did to achieve this was they had hundreds of microphones hooked up everywhere, even hidden in the couches that Oprah and her guests sat on. So I think the moral is not to just be different from your competitors, though that helps, nor is it to be personable, because if everyone's personable and hooks their microphones up in the couches, again, not much of an advantage there, but it is to choose a differentiator that is useful to your audience and that your audience cares about and that others cannot copy as easily. I think that's a great piece of advice for any business. The next lesson from Oprah: turn the viewing into a habit with the scheduled time. So when Oprah finally retired, she had 20 million loyal fans. So she retired and started a TV network, OWN, and she assumed that all her fans would just naturally transfer over to her TV network. But only a very small fraction did. She lost that audience. It evaporated. So what she learned was that her fans weren't as loyal as she thought. What they were they were programmed to a habit of watching her every day at 4 p.m. So it wasn't the audience that she was that she really had. It was more so the habit of everyone watching her at 4 p.m. every day that her audience had gotten into. And once she broke out of that because she retired, people just switched to other shows. So that's, I think, a great lesson for any content creator. The first one is use that power of habit. Always upload at the same time every day. Keep it consistent. Never drop the ball. But also make sure that you don't just be that person that relies on that habit. Because if your show gets pushed to 5 p.m. or, one day you get injured and you can't do the show anymore, they're going to leave you and go somewhere else. So try and build something deeper with your audience so that they stay with you, not just at 4 p.m. every day. Okay, now let's move beyond secrets of television and let's go to just general principles and peak performance success habits. Keep your blinders on and realize you can run your own race. So Oprah tells everyone that you have to realize that there will be copycats and competitors. And she told all her staff, her entire team, to just focus on what they were doing and not what any of the other talk show hosts were doing. And within the time of the Oprah show, over 200 talk show hosts came and went. However, during that time, her team never once did any research on other talk show hosts and came up with ideas or said, hey, let's try that because that guy's doing it. Oprah says that the only race that you should run is against yourself. You have to be the best you can be, not someone else. So I find that incredibly interesting because I think it's one of those areas of contradictory advice. But before we get into that, let's just talk about this a little bit more. When Oprah was really getting really successful, big TV executives were trying to copy her. So they had a talk show host that was female, then a talk show host that was African American, and then one that was female and African American. And they did all these things trying to figure out why Oprah was so successful. But they were copying the superficial stuff, and it wasn't her real secret sauce. And they could never really do it. Oprah was just Oprah, and she just did incredibly well. So back to the contradictory advice. The reason I say that is because in business, you have a lot of billionaires like Steve Jobs, Sam Walton, the founder of Costco. Many of them will say that they will copy shamelessly if it's a good idea, and they will study their competitors quite closely. Sam Walton's probably the best example. He's the founder of Walmart, and he's probably created more wealth than anyone in the history of humankind, arguably, through business. And he would always walk around his competitors' stores and analyze everything. And any little thing that gave him an idea or that was done better than his store, he would copy it and then do it even better. So, I don't know what to say here. Maybe it's industry independent. Maybe for TV it's different than for retail. But it does seem like sometimes you shouldn't spend too long looking at others because it'll get in your head. It'll tempt you to be less of you than you should be. And maybe it's something where the advice is different when you're talking about a personality-based business or TV show versus a, corporation like Walmart. That might be it either. I'm not exactly sure, but there is a bit of contradictory advice here. I think there may even be a healthy medium where it's like, yeah, don't compare yourself to anyone else on an individual basis. But for your business, if someone's really got a great idea and you really think that you can perform better by doing it, then it could probably help to, observe them a bit, do a little research, and then copy them if it's legal, which, it always was for Sam Walton. Sam only did the legal type of copying. He never did illegal, stealing. So keep that in mind. And I think for me, that's where my philosophy is different from other people. Some people will take advice from all these different sources, from chess prodigies or books like The War of Art by Sun Tzu, and apply them to business or exercise or life. And I think that's very dangerous to do. I think, yes, you can get ideas from it, but if you're not scientific and you don't measure things out, I really, even then, I wouldn't even do it, because Sun Tzu wrote a book about war. That book, he's probably one of my Chinese ancestors. Sun Tzu, he wrote that book, The Art of War, on warfare and war habits and war formations and structures and ambushing and so forth. And so apply that to chess or your business or learning whatever else. It just doesn't work as well, because, different skill sets have different processes. And I think you're shooting yourself in the foot if you would rather choose to learn from The Art of War versus all these other hundreds of books by billionaires and successful people who have actually succeeded in business giving you business advice. You'd rather turn to a book on war than this other stuff. That's why I think it does heat me up a bit, but that's why my philosophy is different, because I see a lot of that out there. A lot of people are, that's what they'll do. They'll tell you like, oh, the best business book in the world is like random, book on art or war or, I don't know, some Greek philosopher. And the only thing that I have to say about that is, well, can you study the history of that guy? Just because he's some Greek philosopher with a fancy last name doesn't necessarily mean that he was successful in his own right. A lot of people like to quote Marcus Aurelius or Sun Tzu or Lao Tzu. Well, Marcus Aurelius, was his life really that great? He was a decent tactician. Personal life, other areas, just maybe you want to check Wikipedia first. So let's move on here. Back to Oprah. There are two emotions, love and fear. That's her next piece of advice. I think this is really crucial because this was a mantra that she embodied and she made sure her entire staff embodied. And one time, this was back in the 80s where everyone was a lot more racist and you could literally still die from racism. People were still getting hurt, killed. And they went to Georgia during one of the biggest riots and lynchings. And it was a very dangerous time. So Oprah went in there, did her off-the-show interviews, and their team was sent death threats, like legitimate phone calls and ominous messages telling them not to come. But none of them were scared because they embodied this mantra of love and fear. Those are the only two emotions. And of course, you're never going to have any fear. So Oprah made sure that really the only emotion that her team had was love, because they were told that there's only two emotions, love and fear, and that you should never be fearful. So, they also were told that they were kind of on opposite ends of the extreme. If you're fearful, you're not loving. If you're loving, you're not fearful. And so, I think that's something we all can learn from. I definitely can. I definitely need to love more. And is that on a realistic level true? Not necessarily. As you just noticed, I got a bit angry with the whole art of war thing. But I think, generally speaking, if I were to use her mantra, I probably could have been more loving and gentle and not so, outraged. So it does, in effect, tone down my anger. Her next, lesson for you is do something different, stand out. As I mentioned, Oprah did a lot of different things from how the typical talk show hosts did things. As I said, she revealed a lot of her flaws and insecurities, which was unheard of for talk show hosts. And she also brought on a lot of very, very controversial guests for the very first time. People who were racist, gay, homophobic, or cheated on their wife. What's interesting to note is that it took her a few decades to really find her stride in her message. Her first few decades running her talk show, her show was very similar to Jerry Springer's show. It was in the sense that it is now, in the sense that Jerry Springer's show is, which is, it was very tabloid heavy, very shocking. It was really focused on just crazy people and really crazy lives, people who had just cheated on their wife, had a second baby, and all this stuff. And, over time, Oprah started realizing this isn't exactly the type of message I want to spread to this audience that I have. And she slowly started changing. The next lesson, be fearless of what you're going after and what you want to do. So I've already hinted at this with that whole story where she decided to go to Chicago despite the fact that her boss was threatening her and telling her she would never make it and to keep her job. Obviously, that's not the best thing for a boss to do. Like, imagine if she had chose to stay. You had just, spat in your employee's face, not literally, but figuratively. Now you're going to it's not going to be fine and dandy either way anymore. So you should have never said that in the first place. Nonetheless, what I mean by take risk is discover what you want to do with your life over time. And when you do, again, it won't happen quickly. You stand by it and you take those risks and stick with your message and what you want to do. Now, Oprah, okay, imagine this. If you had a show that was number one across the entire world, you were getting 12 to 13 million viewers a day, which will never happen again for a TV show because entertainment nowadays is just so split amongst so many different mediums, from social media to television to Netflix and all these different sources. But if you were in that situation, would you ever consider changing anything? You're making great money, you're in number one show, and you're getting 13 million viewers a day. Would you consider changing the format of the show? Well, Oprah did. Her team didn't want to when she told her team. But Oprah realized that she didn't want to be the controversial, scandalous talk show anymore. So she told her team, and her team resisted, but she persisted, and her viewership dropped to 9 million a day for quite a while, from 13 million. But slowly and surely, she climbed back up. What she did was she changed her show format so that it was about empowering people to be the best versions of themselves that they could, rather than just hey, we're going to have another scandalous guest on the show today. He just cheated on his wife, and his wife just cheated on him. So she changed the format of her show, and it slowly climbed, and then gradually it hit like something crazy, like 20 million per day. Another big thing is that she took another huge risk as well. This time it took a lot of thinking before she really decided to do so, but she, towards the height of her success, she decided to launch a new segment called Oprah's Favorite Things, and also Oprah's Book Club. And her book club especially was a tough decision because, again, less people were reading books. She really loved books, though, and she wasn't sure if her audience would really like this. It turned out to be one of her most successful segments. She ended up selling in total over 50 million books recommended from her book club over the lifetime of her show, and it was a great success. And if you see any of her book clubs, especially the very first episode, you could tell that she loves books, and so it's important to choose something that you really like, because when she announces her books, she literally announces the book like it's the coming of Jesus Christ or something. Like it's ridiculous. Like she loves books that much. And she also admits that a lot of these segments for her shows came out of just her dealings with her day-to-day life and her team. And what I mean by that is one of her segments was Oprah's Favorite Things. And it started with just her really, whenever she found a product she really, really, really liked, she would buy it for her whole team at her show. And then it slowly blossomed and grew. And she said, you know what? Why don't I try this for a show? And a lot of other segments occurred through that medium. The next lesson from Oprah is never have fear of disaster. Oprah was never fearful, as you can kind of tell. She wasn't scared of losing money or viewership at all. Although her team was, she kept doing these things because here's how she put it. From the beginning, her audience was following her as a person and her instincts to discover what was true and share that knowledge. And as long as she kept being true to herself, at least one person out there would be interested in what she had to say. This quote confused me a bit because, I understand myself saying that quote, but Oprah had a whole network to please. And if you didn't, hit a certain threshold of audience, like you weren't making enough money and you're axed like the hundreds of talk show hosts before her. So even if you had just one person who liked your content, would that be enough? I guess what she's saying here is that she was not scared of losing her talk show or her job or the money. She was born to kind of, and I'm just guessing here, she was born to kind of be a personality to the masses. And if just one person was willing to listen to her, then that was enough for her. So maybe that's what she's saying. For me, I don't care of course I want higher numbers, but if only 5 rather than 10 people listen to my podcast, it's not going to make or break me or my career or livelihood. So that was why I was confused a bit by the quote, but I can kind of understand what she's saying here. The next thing is think of the person on the other end and what they want, and then provide that value. Now, of course, this applies to almost anything, but obviously it really is important for any sort of entertainment medium or talk show or business. Think about the customer on the other end, the viewer of the TV show. So Oprah, she had a very specific persona. And I think this is something that a lot of successful business people do. And so that persona was a middle-aged housewife who worked at home during the day. And so she even had a name for this persona called Susie. Ellen actually does a similar thing. If you read Ellen DeGeneres' books, She has a very similar persona too, but hers was white, Caucasian, middle-aged, female wife, home wife. But anyhow, Oprah would always ask herself, is this something that Susie would like to see before she did it on her show? So she was very cognizant and aware that you don't just do stuff. In order to grow an audience, you have to make sure it's something of value that your target ideal audience member would actually want to consume. Later on, when she started her book club, she found that roughly 10% of her audience would always respond and buy the book she recommended every time. Therefore, on average at the time she had a 10 million person per day audience. She knew that 1 million would buy her books each time. So she applied the same idea and she said, if I were to recommend this book, would at least 1 million other people like it? So she always screened her books to make sure it was something that was, mass media consumable in a sense, which I think is very interesting. Another great thing, another lesson from her, it's okay to start scrappy. When Oprah began her talk show, her team was really small. It was just all girls, and it was in a tiny room and with her other 3 producers. And it was small enough to the point where they borrowed each other's clothes and jewelry and makeup and just passed around notes. And they just kind of like made up ideas off the top of their heads and talked. Another one, this one's cliche, but really important. Work hard. All the top executives and producers that have been with Oprah's show from the start, they were successful, and Oprah was successful because the show became their life. That's all they did. Like they would work from the moment they woke up until the time they slept sometimes at the show. The next lesson, be strategic. So this one relates to her plan to move to Chicago. So here's the exact research she did. She knew that she had to break into the television network industry, and therefore she knew that she couldn't stay in her smaller town anymore. So, this girl had hustle. She researched all the big cities, and she kind of like narrowed it down. She realized DC was too competitive, and every radio station was already occupied by black hosts there. Baltimore was similar. She was actually already in Baltimore, and it was kind of, she kind of like maxed out her potential there. New York was very much too busy and movement centric, and she needed one place as her home base. And by process of elimination, long story short, she settled on Chicago as her ideal city, and she eventually, took a risk and moved there. The next lesson, be enthusiastic. This is one that Napoleon Hill talks about a lot too. Napoleon Hill, he spent his whole life studying the world's most successful people, and he also really recommends enthusiasm if you want to be successful. But you can kind of see Oprah is and was always bursting with energy and emotion. She talked about topics that she was deeply interested in. And at the start of her show, that was mainly female dating problems. Over time, that enthusiasm transferred over to her audience and made her magnetic. When she announced what the next book was for her book club, it would just make the crowd roar. The next lesson, logically consider the truth and keep calm. It's important to be rational and calm because sometimes your emotions get the better of you. And one time, Oprah mentioned a comment on her show. She took a jab at people who ate beef, and cattlemen sued Oprah for millions of dollars and claimed that she used her massive audience to depress beef sales by talking about bad beef. Because beef sales did actually drop significantly after she said that on her show. They called her all these things, a manipulator. They took her to court. She handled this lawsuit, and what she did was to get through all that stress was she assessed the situation. She knew that she did not do it to manipulate or depress sales, and therefore realized what was true, which allowed her to keep calm during the entire trial. She was ultimately not found liable. The next lesson, do something that will never happen again and celebrate it. Oprah is always celebrating and enjoying her achievements. And as I mentioned, the viewership of her show will probably never hit that level again, at least not in the same way, because entertainment is now just so split up. There's thousands of YouTube channels, hundreds of TV channels. But when Oprah was in her peak, there's only like a handful of television channels to compete with. So it was tough to get in. But if you can capture that crowd, like you were in the forefront of up to 20 to 30% of the nation's mind every day. Crazy. The next lesson, embrace patient trial and error. Oprah spent decades figuring out the message and purpose of her show. She finally changed her slogan from "Change Your Life" to "Live Your Best Life." And this was one of her final messaging changes. It was finally like touching up the last bits of what she wanted to make her show about. And so you can kind of see that it's a gradual, sometimes decade-long progression to find out what your purpose is. And that change came from the fact that she was doing great already. She was liking the new, concept of helping other people, but she was still getting kickback because people were, reacting with opinions like, well, what's wrong with me as I am? Why are you telling me to change my life? Am I not good enough? So instead, she just tweaked it a bit and made it "Live Your Best Life," which has been her slogan. I just have a couple more lessons, and that's it. Remember to do what's valuable to the audience rather than only what you want. Now, I kind of mentioned a very similar lesson from her earlier, but this one is subtly different. Now, the one I mentioned before was more so focused on just generally speaking. So let's say you have a TV show. That means if they're, all midwives, you should talk about topics that a midwife would like. But on a more subtle and specific level, Oprah knew that her audience cared about celebrities' personal and dating lives. And Oprah said that she never once cared about what her guests' personal dating lives were herself. She didn't care. She thought it was a personal thing, but she knew that her audience did, so she always made sure to ask questions about those topics to her guests when they came on. So I think that's very interesting. For me, again, you might be thinking something similar. I couldn't help but think, well, then why don't you just change your messaging like you did with the rest of your show and, move to something that you liked if you don't like, tabloid news or talking about celebrity news. And I'm guessing maybe it's because, two things. One is that she wasn't really against it. She just was neutral. But she knew her audience liked it. And the second was that I think it's part of the industry. Like, it's kind of like talk show hosts are a good portion of them. By definition, their industry is in that whole celebrity gossip and news area. So to remove that completely could maybe derail the show. Based off economics, but maybe not. I don't know. I think there's Larry King, and he didn't really talk about celebrity gossip. Or did he? Maybe he did. I just have two more. Always have a good reason for your actions. Along with all the other things she made sure her employees knew, which I think is really important. You can clearly see that she really emphasized certain values and made sure her team lived by those values. Oprah always told her team to ask what the intention of each of their behaviors was. So if they had a project or a task that they had to do, if they asked that question and they couldn't come up with a good answer, then they were told not to do that. So, of course, this played out in a lot of ways, and it was a great way of really aligning and checking if the segments on her show aligned with her values and her messaging. So when she did her car giveaway, she got a whole bunch of free cars from a car company, and her team was like, yeah, let's do a huge car giveaway. And Oprah was like, well, why? And eventually they came to the conclusion, well, the only way this isn't aligning with their message. It's not just about giving away fancy stuff. So Oprah said, I'm only doing this if you choose people who really need the car, because her intention was behind the show was around helping other people who needed it. Finally, the last lesson from Oprah is the packaging in a gift is just as important as the gift. So on the day of the car giveaway, Oprah ended up making them redo the bow ties on the cars, and that took a few extra hours because it only covered a portion of the car, but she wanted the bow to cover the entire car. And she knew that the packaging in a gift is just as important as the gift. So make sure you apply that. I mean, that's more of a minor point. You may not have gifts in your daily life to give, but maybe you do in the form of your resume or just something else. Just be creative here. So I think that's really important. Now, you might be wondering, how did she become a billionaire if she didn't do it through business? Obviously, there's always a element of large numbers at play, and business is usually the best way of monetizing that. And she actually did eventually start her business called Harpo. But she did that like well into the point where she was already making a lot of money. And the reason she did that was out of necessity. She wasn't being treated right. She wasn't given the respect that she wanted. So she took her money and bought out the whole television show and television, talk show and her whole team. And she started her own company called Harpo, which is a character in a show that she played. I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of cool things about Oprah. Harpo is also one of the characters in one of the first movies she played for with Steven Spielberg when she was first getting started. The movie was called The Color Purple. It was based off a book. It was a book she read in her childhood. And it was one of those magic moments of almost destiny because the character she wanted to play was her name spelled backwards or vice versa. And it all kind of came together. Like it was almost like one of those magic moments. She was, crying about her weight, and also crying that she probably didn't get the role after the audition because it didn't seem like they were interested. It's already been many days. And it was like the role she really thought she was destined for. And long story short, she got it. So the point is she started this company. It's named Harpo. Now the company, I think, has ended after she retired. But during that time, she became an entrepreneur and CEO. And now, does that mean that you have to become an entrepreneur? But not necessarily. But again, most of us don't need billions of dollars to be happy. Millions will do. And there's many more people making millions who aren't CEOs of companies. Having said that, though, with Oprah, it also is a bit of encouragement if you're interested in entrepreneurship because, as you can see with Oprah, as Richard Branson says, sometimes the best entrepreneurs are not, they're not born. They're made, or they turn into entrepreneurs out of out of necessity, or because they find a need in the world that needs to be fulfilled. So in Oprah's case, it was something that just naturally happened. And it may not be as intimidating as you think it is. Nonetheless, that's all I got to say. Don't let these tips overwhelm you. Just pick a few at a time. And I do think that you can really succeed in life. Now, you're probably wondering, like, well, where's that point where you said that it would save me years of time and money? Well, a lot of these do, but the one big regret I think that Oprah voiced on her show, I mean, there's obviously she's probably had other regrets, but the biggest one was her messaging. She had all these members of the KKK on her show. If you don't know what the KKK are, they're like a very racist, anti-black, supremacist clan that used to be really big and used to kill a lot of black people in America. And she brought them on, and she thought that she was in charge and showing the world how bad they were. But instead, again, this wasn't the first time she brought on a group like this. But instead, halfway through the program, she realized, oh my goodness, they are using me. They are leveraging my audience and platform to recruit people. And that's exactly what happened. They actually recruited a bunch of members from her show. So Oprah, from that moment on, she realized, and this is, a regret that she couldn't change because she had already done years of her show like this. But from then on, she decided that for her and her messaging for her show, she wanted to do something that really helped people and did not help people that were bad. And so, long story short, her regret was not, I wouldn't say regret, but she could have not wasted as many years if she had known that earlier. So maybe that's something that you consider. Like, if you already have a platform, or if you're growing that platform, or if you have that career or business or whatever, and you're impacting these people, whether it's a small or large audience, ask yourself, is this messaging and this platform really doing what I want it to do? Is it spreading good? Is it spreading bad? Am I bringing on people or guests, or talking about topics or saying things that are in misalignment with my overall goals? And that could save you quite a few years of time. Thanks for watching. If you like this, not watching, listening. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on iTunes, and you'll be notified when I release new podcast episodes. If you're a really helpful person, I would really love it if you would leave a rating on iTunes for my podcast. It'll let me be noticed more in iTunes and reach more people. You could do that by you can search my podcast name on iTunes, Will's Personal Development Podcast, or you can simply go to a URL I set up, willyoulaugh.com/podcast, and that will redirect you to my iTunes page. And from there, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you can just leave a rating, that'd be great. Thanks again for listening, and I can't wait to talk to you in the next episode. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.